Hi everyone, this is Atya here again, and today I wish to discuss an important topic that is related to evolution. Okay, so as you all know, Charles Darwin was the pioneer of modern evolution. Okay, so today we would just summarize what this evolution in Darwin's terms meant. Okay, so we would see here I have written Darwinian evolution, and these are some of the postulates and these are the drawbacks. We would study each one in detail. Okay, so the first one is overproduction. When you speak about overproduction, what does it mean is, in all the organisms which are present, they have the tendency to produce a lot of offsprings. Okay, and this is one of the highlights of Darwinian evolution. We are not discussing whether it is good or bad, we are just discussing what exactly did Darwin meant by overproduction. Okay, so in first case, humans and all the other organisms have the tendency to reproduce and to overproduce. Okay, so for example, one insect can give rise to several other offsprings. One duck can give rise to 10 eggs. One tree can give rise to 1,000 seeds. These are just approximations, but what I am trying to say is, each organism or each species has the tendency to overproduce, and this is what we are going to look at. Okay, now moving on to the second postulate. Second postulate is variation, and variation, as the term suggests, means difference. Okay, all of us are different. That means we have some kind of variation. Even if you see twins, unless they are monozygotic twins, they will be different. Their genetic makeup, everything is different. Now, why is this difference necessary? Is because this difference is what contributes to the adaptation of species. Okay, climate changes a little bit, we develop variations to adjust to those kind of conditions. Okay, so whenever there are any kind of situations or whenever there are any kind of changes, we develop some variation from the existing ones so that we can adapt to it. Why is it required? Because if we do not adapt to it, we will perish, we will die, in layman's terms. Okay, so that is why this variation is required. So variation is continuous. It is not that one variation will happen now and then some other variation will occur later, then some variation will occur later. So each variation, it is a continuous process and it leads to adaptation, and adaptation is important for survival. That is first thing. As I said, no two organisms are similar except monozygotic twins. Okay, and why is all this required? Because it helps us to become a better competitor, which leads to a polymorphic condition. Polymorphic condition means one condition which has several forms. Okay, so the gene may be one, but the way it is expressed will be different in different population, because it has developed those kinds of traits because of variation. Okay, so that is one thing. So variation is nothing but your difference which is present. Okay, now the third postulate is struggle for existence. What does struggle for existence means? All this overproduction, variation, why does it occur? Because all organisms, they want to live. Okay, so the final goal of that particular species is so that they are striving to live. Okay, existence is the primary goal of all species. Okay, now All this competition occur. Why does it occur? Because they want to get the resources so that they are able to exist properly, so that they are able to live properly. Okay? Then, every habitat has fixed carrying capacity. What does carrying capacity means? How many organisms or how many different species it can support. Okay? Say for example, you have a room which can accommodate 20 people. Okay? Maybe it can go to 30, but it will never go to 100. Why? Because if it goes to 100, even if you are able to stay in it, the resources will not be sufficient. Okay? So if every habitat has a fixed carrying capacity, that means every space, habitat means in layman's terms it is space. Okay? So when the carrying capacity increases beyond that particular level, then the competition is actually for the resources. Okay? For example, in a room which can accommodate 20 people, you have managed to crowd that room with 100 people, then in such cases these individuals will not get proper oxygen. Okay? These will not get proper food to eat if we are considering that as an isolated system. So beyond the carrying capacity of the individual, all these competitions or the competition occurs because they want to survive and because the resources have to be sufficient for that kind of individual. Okay? And the competition could be several types. It could be within the species or it could be between the species. Okay? Within the species meaning say only suppose humans are there, then humans have a peculiar way of eating or they have particular resource. Okay? If I consider competition for area, like we can also compete with other species for area. Okay? But we will not compete with other species for cooked food. Okay? So it could be competition interspecific or intraspecific. Interspecific means between two different species, and intraspecific means it is within those particular species. Okay? And intraspecific competition is always stronger because when you have the same species, they know each other's weaknesses. Okay? So they know exactly how to get resources. But when you have two different species, the competition is low as compared to the intraspecific, because in interspecific both the species, they do not know each other's weaknesses and how to beat each other in getting those resources. Clear? So now the fourth one is survival of the fittest. Now, in Darwin's theory, there is one term which occurs very specifically, and it is called natural selection. And what does natural selection means is, if say suppose two species are competing for the same resource, then if one wins, has acted on it. Okay? If one individual or if one species has the tendency to better adapt to environmental conditions as compared to other, then in such cases it is called as a natural selection. Selection means what? Out of all the pool of species, we are selecting one species. Okay? And why we are selecting one species? Because that is able to adapt to the changing environmental condition, changing environmental or any kind of circumstances. Okay? That is called as natural selection, and it occurs as a result of competition. Okay? Now, there are two terms that Darwin has always focused. One is differential survival and one is differential reproduction. Okay? If as a result of competition, one species has a better tendency to survive as compared to other, then it is called as differential survival. That means with with respect to other, this particular species has better survival capacity. Okay. Differential reproduction means what? If any kind of reproductive barriers, whether they be geographical reproductive barriers or internal reproductive barriers, if a species is able to overcome and it is able to reproduce, then in such cases it is called as differential reproduction. Do you understand? Okay. So differential survival means having traits which are different than others and which make it more stronger or more adaptable to the situation, and differential reproduction means a species which has the capacity to reproduce even in the face of any kind of reproductive barriers. Okay. So in such cases, that species will be said to be naturally selected. And as per Darwinian evolution, there is nothing called as best fit. Okay. An individual or species could be best fit in terms of at a given circumstances, but if the circumstance changes or if the environmental condition changes, then it will no longer be best fit. So in terms of Darwinian evolution, there is nothing called as best fit. Understood? Now how does a species originate? First of all, say suppose this is a parental population. In one area there are so many individuals of a species which are present, okay, of the same species. Now selection will act on it, and in some way these two will get isolated. Okay, these two will get isolated. So what does, this is the parental population, it overproduces, there is no space to live for them. The selection pressure acts on it, and they will get segregated. They will start developing different traits. Okay. Now once they start developing different traits, reproductive isolation will occur. Reproductive isolation means what? Even though they are of the same species, because of selection, they will develop such traits that they will not be able to reproduce with each other. And that is called as reproductive isolation. And this is the barrier of reproductive isolation. Once they are not able to reproduce within itself, the species, in case of Darwin, what does he say? If they are not able to reproduce within themselves, that means they are two different species. Now these two populations of the same species have developed as two different species because of the reproductive barrier which is present, and that is the hallmark of Darwinism. Okay, Darwin says that when do you call a species different species? When they are not able to mate amongst themselves. Okay, and these were the 5 postulates of Darwin's. So there are few drawbacks which you just need to touch upon. The Darwin's work at that time was against religion, so he was criticized for that thing, for that purpose at that time. Now it doesn't matter. Now he couldn't explain the source of variation. How does variation occur? That he could not explain. And third, selection should actually decrease biodiversity. If out of several other populations you are selecting one population, then actually the biodiversity should decrease. But actually the biodiversity has increased. Okay, so he could not explain those parts of his theories. So this was all about Darwinian evolution.